She lived quietly with a man that not many people could stand. While everyone was afraid of how rude he would be, she quietly learned things that would save many lives one day. But no one thought that the woman behind a fool would be known for being brave and having a clear vision at a key point in Israel's history. How can someone stay sane while being with someone who is crazy? What makes a normal woman a real shield against bad things? Abigail showed that having both wisdom and bravery can change the course of events. Even though they didn't have swords, she stopped a war. She won the heart of a king, even though she didn't have a throne. A man with a lot of money lived in the rocky hills of Judah, in a place called Meon. He had flocks that went all over the fields of Carmel. Nabal was his name. 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats were on his property, which was a clear sign of wealth. But his wealth didn't show that he was a good person. On the contrary, he was known for being cocky, rude, and not very smart. The word in his name, fool, seemed to be a curse on everything he did. Abigail was living next door to him. In every way different from her husband, she was a woman who was admired for both her unusual beauty and her sharp mind. Not only did Abigail look nice, but she was also a force that made people calm down when they were angry. Her name, which means "my father's joy," was almost a sign because the way she behaved turned problems into solutions and stopped fights from happening in the first place. Even in a house where Nabal was always impatient, Abigail knew how to be smart. She handled people, work, staff, and especially emergencies with balance and respect. She was strong not when she yelled, but when she was quiet and thought. Not when she gave orders, but when she spoke slowly. She was the kind of woman who watched first, thought about it later, and then did something. When she did something, the outcome was always surprising and useful. When things got really bad between her husband and David, the Lord's chosen, this practical and spiritual knowledge would shine through. David wasn't really king yet, but an army of men who were loyal to him were already following him. As he and his troops went through Carmel, they showed respect for Nabal's herders by keeping the flock safe and not taking anything for themselves. So, David sent agents to ask for help with food. Being asked by someone who had been kind was a fair thing to do. But Nabal replied with disdain. He refused to give David any food because he didn't know who David was. This rude answer made David very angry right away. He got his troops ready for fight. It was in his mind that he was going to destroy Nabal's house and everything in it. A tragedy seemed certain to happen. And right then, Abigail walked into the scene. Without waiting, she quickly got wine, meat, bread, and dried fruit. She put everything on donkeys and went after David by herself. She did what she had to do without waiting for orders or talking to her husband first. When she saw the troops coming, she got off her horse, bowed down to the leader, and spoke with humility, wisdom, and power. For peace's sake, she asked that the blame be put on her and gave them food. David was moved by what she said and realized that it was not only a woman's wisdom that kept him from killing innocent people on a whim, but also God's hand. Thanks to the way she behaved, Abigail saved her house. But what was coming would make her life different for good. Thanks for watching. If this story has touched your heart so far, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs a brave and wise example. We can get these kinds of statements to more people with your help. Also, please leave a super thank you if you want to help this job. We can keep telling more Bible stories and spreading this message of faith and hope thanks to your gift. Thank you so much for your help. We'll keep going on our trip today. The house that Nabal and Abigail lived in showed the difference between having a lot of money and not having any values. People remembered her husband for being rude and cocky, but they respected how she could make things balance out. Living together was not only hard every day, but it also tested Abigail's will to keep things in order without losing her pride. Even though her husband did stupid things, she kept the workers' respect and the business running smoothly. She was often the quiet one in charge of the flocks, the deals with the herders, and the organization of housework. Abigail was quiet and authoritative, but she didn't have to be. Everyone who lived with her liked her just the way she was. In Israel, at the time this story took place, things were very unstable. Samuel had already chosen David to be king, but he was still on the run because Saul saw him as a threat to his throne. So David and his group of loyal fighters walked through the deserts, often without a place to stay or enough food. For a short time, David and his men took shelter in the desert of Paran. There, among the dry sand and rocky fields, their presence turned out to be a blessing for the people who lived there. David was very fair and honest, so he told his men not to touch the people's goods, even if they were in need. So that the farmers could work without being interrupted, they kept the sheep safe from thieves and natural disasters. These actions were seen by others, and Nabal's workers knew that the group of traveling fighters was a big reason why the fields were still safe. The time of year when Nabal's flocks were sheared was a happy time in the Carmel area. At that time, people gathered wool, celebrated, and ate a lot, as the Israelites did all the time. Showing kindness was more than expected during these happy and prosperous times. It was a public display of character. People who had worked or helped the great lords in some way were thanked and given gifts at this time. It was clear from custom that people who were protected should give back. Because of this, David sent some of his men to Nabal with a polite and respectful request. They didn't ask for anything. They only reminded him that they had been quiet friends, and that now, when things were good, they hoped to be received with some food. What they asked for wasn't too much: bread, water, and maybe a little meat. Simple things that a man with so much money wouldn't miss. Nabal's answer, on the other hand, was rude and insulting. He wouldn't say who David was, acting like he had never heard of him. He told them he was a wanted person and turned down their request. His workers didn't say anything because they knew what would happen if he was turned down, but David heard the word, and it was very mean. What started out as a peaceful wish turned into a need for payback or justice. As things got more tense and guys got ready to fight, Abigail stayed alert. She was aware of the anger her husband's careless words could cause. She also knew it was up to her to stop the tragedy that was about to happen. While people were celebrating the wool crop and the fields were filled with the sounds of joy, tension grew in the background. Nabal was so full of himself that he didn't see how an easy choice could have terrible results. Being cheap at a time when people were expecting him to be generous showed what kind of person he was and put everyone around him in danger. In a culture where being friendly was important, his harsh refusal was taken as an insult. Abigail, on the other hand, continued to be a source of balance and respect. Even when things were going badly at home, she kept the house's honor with grace. She knew how to live her life honestly. Even though it was hard to be with a man who slandered his own name, the workers looked up to her as a model of fairness and loyalty, which is rare and valuable in these difficult times. At the same time, David and his troops had to deal with the harsh conditions of the desert as strangers in their own land. These guys were persecuted and forgotten because they didn't have a permanent place to stay or any promises. But they didn't steal or use force. Instead, they decided to guard. They picked to be good. During the cutting season, the Carmel fields were mostly safe because of the quiet, watchful presence of people who didn't ask for anything in return, until now. David chose to offer his hand out of courtesy because he knew it was a happy and generous time, not because they think they deserve it, but because they value custom. As it says in 1 Samuel 25, 6-8, he sent 10 young men with a clear and peaceful word. Peace be with you, your family, and everything you own. Your sheep have been with us. We didn't do them any harm, and they didn't lack anything while they were in Carmel. If you ask your young guys, they'll tell you. The message was well thought out, honest, and clear. It asked for something, not demanded it. It was most important that it was known that the goal was peace, not force. David hoped that smart people would win out. After all, a man with that much money could easily feed them without losing anything. But Nabal didn't answer in a way that a respected man would have. He wasn't thankful or even respectful when he heard the request. He was rude and angry in response. He made fun of David and suggested that he was just another rogue. "Who is David?" he asked. "Who is Jesse's son?" As if talking about a person they don't know or who isn't important. He didn't pay attention to what the man who would become the most popular king of Israel had done. By doing that, he insulted not only David, but also the whole group that was with him. It wasn't just a rejection, it was an attack on their honor. When Nabal's workers heard his answer, they knew what it could mean. At a time when respect and word were more valuable than cash, contempt was something that needed to be dealt with. David didn't think twice when the agents came back and told him what had been said. He told everyone to put their swords on. They were set on making things right. Abigail started to understand that something was wrong at the same time. A group of scared workers came up to her and told her what had happened. She knew right away what was at stake. Nabal's pride had made a man angry, and even though he was upright, he came with blood in his eyes. She knew she couldn't let guilt hold her back. She had to do something. Quickly, David's words showed respect, and the way he asked was like someone who knew how things were done in that area. The message said, "May these young men find favor with you." It was a call to the respect and kindness that people expect from great men at parties. At that very moment, it would have been nice to thank those who had helped, but Nabal decided to cause trouble. He didn't welcome the messengers with open arms. Instead, he treated them badly. According to 1 Samuel 25:10-11, his answer was rude and angry. "Who is David? Who is Jesse's son? These days, a lot of slaves run away from their hosts. Should I give males I don't know where they come from my bread, water, and meat that I made for my shearers?" That was not only Nabal's answer to their request, but it was also a humiliating one. He didn't care about all the good things David had done for his family. He didn't care that those men were the reason his flocks had done well and been safe. His answer showed that he wasn't thankful for what he had, and that he didn't like anyone who wasn't in his group of power and wealth. Like everyone thought, the news quickly got to David's camp. When the young men came back, they told the truth about everything. David's face changed. It had been calm up until that point. Nabal's insult wasn't just meant to hurt his feelings. It was also an attack on the group's honor. These men had given up their lives to protect someone who now spits on the security he had gotten. David thought this was wrong. His anger blew up with all its might. David gave clear instructions right away. Everyone should get their swords ready. 200 warriors stayed with the luggage, while 400 fighters got ready for battle. The boss, who had been careful not to kill anyone up until that point, was now set on killing all of Nabal's men. He was so mad that he swore, "May God do the same to David's enemies, and even more if he leaves any of Nabal's people alive until morning." It was clear from this comment how bad the blow was. David didn't act on impulse. In fact, he was known for being fair and patient, but Nabal's rudeness was seen as treason and an insult that could not be forgiven. That's when ruined honor called for an instant reaction. David looked like he was about to go to war, not only for justice, but also for his own honor. As the men polished their swords and mounted their horses, no one thought that something bad could happen. Abigail is the only one. The same woman who had wisely kept her home safe many times before was now the only one who could stop the killing. People who worked for her and saw what happened ran up to her and told her what was going to happen. Abigail paid close attention. There wasn't time to fight or try to get Nabal to do something. There was going to be trouble soon, and with it, the need to make a brave choice. Again, it would be up to her to stand between disaster and happiness. Since night was coming, the fate of her home was also getting closer. Wisdom still had something to say, though, even though pride had spoken louder. Abigail was ready for it. Nabal's house was no longer a happy place to be. There was a tense and frightened silence in the air after the rude refusal and the anger directed at David. One of the workers was scared about what might happen, so they went to find Abigail, who was the only one who could do something reasonable. He knew how angry his master could get, but he also knew that this woman was smart and determined, even though she lived with Nabal's stupidity. He quickly went up to her and told her everything. He talked about how David had sent men with nice greetings, but Nabal had treated them badly and made fun of them. But the servant didn't just tell what happened, he also talked about what he had seen. David's group protecting the farmers while they were out in the field. He said, "These men have been very good to us," which is written down in 1 Samuel 25:15-16. "We were able to graze in the field with them for days, and they never hurt us. We had everything we needed. They surrounded us like a wall, day and night." People did not just listen to those words. She knew that not only was her home's safety at risk, but so were the lives of all the men who lived there. She didn't think twice. She knew right away that trying to persuade Nabal would not work, because he would never admit he was wrong. So she did something without asking him first. She gave clear instructions on how to make a large gift: 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 roasted sheep, 5 measures of roasted grain, 100 bunches of raisins, and 200 fig cakes. With care, everything was packed up and put on several donkeys. We couldn't waste any time. The action had to have more than just meaning. It had to have weight, amount, and purpose. While she got ready for the unexpected, she told her workers to go ahead with the loaded animals. Abigail knew this meeting would be tense. David was mad, and his men had weapons. However, it was her duty to step in, even if it put her in danger. So she took the road that led to the army that was coming. She was thirsty for justice. The sounds of the countryside stopped as she walked along the mountain trails. The animals' feet kicked up dust as the wind blew between the rocks. As Abigail came around a tight turn on her way down a hill, she saw a large group of armed men. David and his soldiers were already very close to Nabal's land. It was a very important moment. There was no way to go wrong. With one bad move or word, her whole family could be in danger. However, Abigail didn't just bring food. She also had the attitude of someone who knew what was at stake. She looked straight at David's face, not out of fear, but peace. She wasn't there to protect a stupid husband. She was there to keep a good man from spilling blood on his hands that wasn't necessary. The meeting, which is about to happen, will decide the fate of everyone. There was more to it than just trying to make peace. It was brave, smart, and loving. And Abigail was ready to be the link between being angry and being willing to forgive again. With controlled speed, Abigail got off the horse. She knew that each second was important and that her voice could save many lives. Not because she was afraid of David, but because of how quickly things had to be done. It didn't matter what she did when she saw the fighter and his armed men. She threw herself to the ground with her face toward the ground in a way that showed respect, courage, and prayer. Even though she didn't look up, her voice broke the silence between the swords. "My lord, I should take the blame." This is the start of the speech that is written in 1 Samuel 25:24-25. It was spoken by a woman who was ready to stand between ruin and anger. She begged him to pay attention to what her helper had to say, and then quickly moved away from her husband's behavior. "Nabal, don't pay attention to this bad guy, because his name is the same as him. His name is Fool, and he is foolish." With this opening, Abigail not only admitted that her husband was wrong, but she also took the blame off of David and his soldiers. Even though she hadn't done anything wrong, she took it upon herself to fix its consequences. She did it with honor, without coming across as a victim or making weak arguments. They knew that if they said the right words at the right time, they could stop even the strongest sword. David paid attention to her, and Abigail kept talking in a smart way. She said she hadn't seen the messages when they came, so she couldn't do anything before. But now she was there, not just to bring food, but also to save lives. Then she did something even more impressive. She talked about David's destiny and a bigger plan. She told him again that God had picked him and promised that he would rule over Israel, and that it wouldn't be right for him to break that promise by killing someone to get back at them. Now, my lord, as surely as the Lord lives, and as surely as your soul lives, it was the Lord himself who stopped you from killing and getting revenge on your own. By saying these things, Abigail wasn't just asking David to forgive her, she was also helping him remember what God wanted him to do. Even though things were tense, she showed him that God was in charge. He was told that his behavior should show that he trusted that God, not anger caused by a fool. She was also very brave when she said that anyone who rose up against David would end up like Nabal, not by the actions of people, but by the Lord's judgment. David's heart was softened, and she renewed his faith in God's fairness. Not only did Abigail protect her family, she also told the future king of Israel who he was and where he was going. Her speech was smart, humble, and well thought out. It wasn't an emotional argument, it was an appeal to the qualities of a guy who would lead a country. Someone stood in front of her, torn between the urge to be angry and the memory of God's call. And in that moment, Abigail helped bring justice and kindness back into balance. David was quiet for a moment, taking in everything that was said. What happened next would not only change what happened to Nabal's family, but it would also change the course of Israel's history. She finished her plea with her eyes on David and a strong voice. She asked him to accept the gift that was meant for the young guys who were with him. It was a genuine offer of both food and peace. She asked, "Please forgive your servant for what he did," and she meant it. Then she took her speech to a higher level. She saw in David the chosen one of God, the one for whom the Lord would build a strong house, because he had fought in the fights of the Most High and had never done anything bad. These words didn't just fly away. They got deep into David's heart like a bomb. The anger that was burning in his heart started to give way to truth and reason. That woman, who was smart and brave, stopped him from making a mistake that could not be fixed. The lives of Nabal's workers were in danger, and so was the honor of a man who had been called to be a just leader. David didn't think twice about recognizing that God was behind what happened. He looked at Abigail, who was still bowed down, and said something that would be remembered as a reminder of how important it is to know the right time and action to take. "Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, for sending you to see me today. What a wise and wonderful person you are. You kept me from killing someone and doing my own justice." These words were important at more than just that time. It was up to David to decide whether to let his anger control him or to trust that God would punish the bad people. Because she was smart and brave, Abigail told him that a real leader doesn't act out of anger but out of right. David gladly took the food she brought, showing his deep thanks. He accepted more than just food. He also accepted the act of healing, the link between the fool's mistake and the good man's answer. After that, he told Abigail that no one would come near her house. What a fighter thought was right before was now wrong because of the help of a wise woman. David took the thing she brought from her and told her, "Go up in peace to your house. See that I heard your voice and respected you." This is what it says in 1 Samuel 25:35. The fight was over before a sword was even drawn because of these words. She had protected her own home, saved lives, and brought back a man's honor without spilling a single drop of blood. As she went back along the road, the dusty dust was still rising in the background, but there was no longer any danger. Even though her heart was still beating fast, she was sure that she had done the right thing. She didn't want praise or attention. Her goal was to save lives, and she did it with words, bravery, and smarts. For his part, David kept quiet for a while. His mind kept going back to what Abigail said. She told him that the Lord would build him a house that would last. At that moment, he realized that real leaders know how to listen, know when to back off, and know how to hear God speaking, even if it's through a woman. Abigail went back home alone, carrying both the weight of what she had dodged and the peace that she had found. She was so thankful that not only had she saved lives, but she had also been heard. She stood tall when she met the future king, and now she was going back to her home, where a man who didn't know how dangerous he had been would greet her again. As she went through the gates, she saw Nabal having a great time. There was a big feast going on. A toast, food and drinks were served to him as if he were a king during a time of victory. Nothing showed that they were worried or sorry, and Nabal had no idea how close he had been to dying. He also had no idea that his wife's smarts had saved the lives of all the servants on that farm. As always, Abigail was smart. She watched what was going on and chose not to say anything because she knew he was drunk. It didn't help to try to explain anything to this man when he was drunk and cocky. She waited. She knew it was time to tell Nabal the truth, but only when he could fully understand what had happened. When he woke up the next morning, sober again, Abigail went up to him and told him everything. She told him that David was angry and hurt and was moving with his men to destroy his house. She told them that she had gathered goods, stopped the army, and kept people from getting hurt. She told him the truth, not to make him feel bad, but to show him what he had done wrong and what almost happened. He turned pale when he heard the story. His eyes stopped sparkling and his body tensed up. The Bible says that his heart turned into stone. He didn't move at all, like his spirit had been ripped out in an instant. Because of how badly it affected him emotionally, many experts think he had a stroke or a serious heart attack. Nabal had always been cocky and disrespectful, but now he had to face the truth. He had almost lost everything, and it was all his fault. He was in serious condition for 10 days, not a word or a move. The man who used to brag about his wealth was now helpless and broken because he could no longer hide the truth. Then, 1 Samuel 25:38 says, 10 days after that, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. It wasn't David who did it, it was God himself. This quick death wasn't just the end of a stupid person. It looked like an act of divine justice. Nabal went against the plans of the Most High because he was proud and didn't want to do good, and God stepped in because he is powerful. It was clear that bad behavior would not go unchecked, even when there was a lot of money around. Not caring about others, making fun of them, or being unfair would be seen by the Lord. It was the end of a circle of quiet pain for Abigail. Even though her marriage was hard, she had been loyal, smart, and careful. She was now free. Not only was he free from the stupid man's control, he was also seen as a good person by both God and people. That wasn't the end of her story. Instead, a new story was about to start, one that would show her even more noble and important qualities. David quickly learned that Nabal had died. His response when he heard what had happened wasn't one of personal victory, but of spiritual recognition. He knew that it wasn't his sword that had done the right thing, but the Lord's hand. He praised the Lord and said, "Blessed be the Lord who has judged my case against Nabal and kept me from doing bad." The Lord has put Nabal's bad behavior back on his own head. Abigail stopped what could have been a massacre, and it also became a sign that God doesn't ignore wrongdoing and that he moves in his own time. Then David made a choice that came as a surprise, but was important. He sent people to Abigail to make his case. He wanted her to marry him. Even though Abigail looked beautiful, she didn't just do it out of thanks or admiration. She was brave, smart, and most of all spiritually wise, which David respected. She had stopped him from making a mistake that he knew was bad, and she did it with faith, humility, and clarity. Abigail, on the other hand, already knew how that man felt. She didn't act like she was proud of how good she was. Instead, she was dressed like a helper. Now, when she got the proposal, she replied with the same attitude. She didn't put herself above others or ask for praise. She bowed to the messengers instead and said, "This is your servant, ready to wash the feet of my Lord's servants." These words didn't just seem like fake acts of humility. They showed who she really was. No matter how important her new job was, Abigail always saw herself as someone who came to help. She quickly got ready for the next part of her life. She got on a donkey with 5 young women who were serving her and followed David's messengers. She didn't think twice. There was more to this offer than just getting married. She knew it was a call to join a bigger purpose. Even though he wasn't king yet, the man who asked her to marry him was already chosen and meant to lead Israel. Abigail, with everything she had, was ready to help him find the right road by being wise and steady. It was more than just marriage that held David and Abigail together. It stood for the partnership between strength and balance, between authority and knowledge. Abigail joined David's group, and her presence would prove useful in making decisions, dealing with stress, and fighting in the future. She would not only be his wife, but also a wise counselor, a source of balance and a way to see things clearly when things were going badly. This new part of Abigail's life was full of freedom and meaning. She moved on from the years she had to deal with Nabal's stupidity and into a new time when her voice and wisdom would be heard, recognized, and important. With her words, she had saved lives, and now she walked with a guy who was picked to lead a country. This story, which is written down in the Bible, still speaks to us today as proof that knowledge can stop bad things from happening, and a woman's honesty can change her fate. Not only did Abigail save her family, but God praised her, David praised her, and people remembered her as one of the most honorable women in Israel. The union of David and Abigail was more than just two people getting married. It was also the strengthening of a bond between authority and knowledge. Abigail played a very important part when she joined the group of people who would become king. She wasn't just a friend, she brought wisdom, balance, and a sense of what the future held. David got a voice that knew when to speak, how to step in, and most importantly, when to stay quiet after living with her. Together with David, Abigail didn't just do normal things. People looked to her for advice because she was smart and strong when things went wrong. She knew how to read the mood, figure out what was going on inside the group, and give smart answers when acting on impulse could ruin everything. She was both very sensitive and very brave, which is a rare and valuable trait for someone who is working with a growing leader. Two Bible stories, 2 Samuel 3:3 and 1 Chronicles 3:1, talk about the birth of Kiliabe, who was also known as Daniel. Even though it's not talked about much in the Bible, Abigail's son showed that her bloodline would continue and that she was important in the house of David. She went from being married to a stupid man to being the mother of a prince and living with the man God picked to rule Israel. But she did a lot more than just be a mother. Abigail played a big role in the group's choices, especially when David had to deal with political problems, danger from outside the group, or disagreements within the group. It was very helpful that she could think clearly in a chaotic environment and see beyond the present time. Because she knew it wouldn't be easy to get to the throne, she gave David advice that only someone with a clear head and a heart for justice could give. David had to deal with ambushes, betrayals, and fights over the years, but Abigail stayed by his side with quiet loyalty. People in the area knew who she was, not just as David's wife, but also as a very honorable and good woman. No one knew much about her past, but they did know how she handled the situation with Nabal. She went where most people would back off. A wise person spoke up when most people would have kept quiet, and this made people admire them. A person of great worth, she was looked up to. Her name was talked about by the workers, the troops, and even the older people, but not in a flattering way. She had too much power for anyone to ignore. With her own life, Abigail had shown that a woman didn't have to take up guns to change things. Because she was smart and had faith, her acts were stronger than any sword. She made a huge difference in David's life. He almost made a mistake that couldn't be fixed, but she stopped him and taught him that being a leader isn't about winning fights, but about controlling himself. David learned from her that you can't rush justice. You have to believe God's times. A king's greatness also rests on how humbly he listens to a wise voice. And Abigail was always there to remind him of this. The things that happened in Abigail's life were not the only important things about her. She wasn't done with her story when she got married to David or when she helped him become king. The future king will always remember Abigail. And the Bible also talks about her as a live example of how knowledge, courage, and faith can change the course of history, even in the hands of someone who didn't seem important to those in power. David learned one of the most important lessons of his life from Abigail's one intervention. Self-control is one of the best ways to show leadership. She led him back to the heart of God's will instead of letting his anger turn into an act of violence that would mark his path. In doing so, she avoided disaster, protected the purity of a holy person, and brought peace to a place where war seemed certain to happen. When David and Abigail got married, it was the start of a new time in both of their personal lives. It was also the start of a new way of leading Israel. Abigail brought with her a sense of tact, care, and common sense. The right time to act, speak, or stay quiet was always clear to her. She also knew when to move forward with hope. David grew up with the help of her guidance. He went on to become king, an artist, a fighter, and a man after God's own heart. In the Bible, Abigail's name is still known as a word that means knowledge and humility. She didn't wait for directions when things went wrong. She was brave, but she wasn't cocky. She didn't make choices on the spur of the moment. Instead, she thought about them and feared the Lord. She wasn't after fame, she just wanted to keep her home safe. She became the main character of a story that would affect kings and generations, even though she didn't want to be. Her story teaches us a few things. The first is how wise people can be in times of chaos. Abigail showed that having a clear mind and a good heart can keep you from falling apart, even when things are tough. She didn't act out of hopelessness or fear. Instead, she acted with calm and strategy, using words and food to save lives instead of swords and threats. Being humble is another important lesson. The first thing she told David about herself was that she was a helper, not the wife of a rich man. In front of a mad army, she took the blame for a mistake she didn't make. She didn't do what she did out of fear. She did it out of bravery for others. She knew that real service is what makes a good leader, and her actions showed that. Abigail also tells us to believe that God will do what is right. She didn't want to get back at Nabal or wish him bad things for what he did. She only did what she did to avoid making a mistake, because she believed that the Lord would show her what she needed to see. That's exactly what took place. The people who punished Nabal for his stupidity were not other people, but God himself. In the early days of Christianity, Abigail was held up as a model of virtue and bravery. People who were being attacked saw her as an example of faith in action, someone who, even though she was at a loss, used her knowledge to protect life and honor God's will. Abigail has all of the good qualities that Proverbs 31 talks about: power, honor, wisdom, and fear of the Lord. She is more than just a character. She is a timeless example of how to be fair in bad situations and how faith and smarts can change people's lives. Abigail's name has been forgotten over time, but people will always remember her. A woman made a quiet move in front of an army that was about to destroy her home. That move became an example of wisdom in action that will never be forgotten. Abigail didn't fight for power, take up guns, or get into fights, but she did change the lives of many people, because sometimes being brave means being calm, and being strong means being able to control yourself. Her story shows that you don't have to be a certain title, position, or gender to be brave. At a time when many others were being shut down, her message was not only heard, it was respected. The things she did for her family, David, and the neighborhood have been remembered for many years. The woman who stood in front of the sword became a symbol of how faith-based knowledge can stop tragedies, give people a sense of purpose, and inspire whole countries. Abigail did not just act on gut when she saved Nabal's house from being destroyed. She knew that every word she spoke and every step she took had consequences, but she didn't think twice. She didn't trust her job. She trusted the God she feared and revered. She became a respected woman because she was sure of herself. She became the wife of a future king and a woman who will be remembered forever. She had a bigger effect. A whole community learned from that one person's choice in the middle of the desert. Men and women both knew about the woman who stopped a bloodbath with food, wine, and words without wanting credit. People thought of Abigail as one of the best examples of insight. Her name came up whenever virtue, wisdom, and justice were talked about. She didn't live to make altars for herself. Her story, on the other hand, became a memorial altar in and of itself. Her life showed that God can use ordinary people from all walks of life to do amazing things. When someone acts with justice and faith, they become a path of God's will, no matter where they are, what society they're from, or what restrictions are in place at the time. She was an agent of peace in every choice she made, every word she spoke, and every moment of quiet she kept. Her story has been told for hundreds of years, motivating whole towns. In times of trouble, when things looked like they were going badly, Abigail's story served as a lesson that one person with strong faith and active knowledge can change the course of events and bring light where there is darkness. Abigail's life story is more than just facts. It's a call for all of us to live with purpose, act fairly, speak the truth, and stroll with God. She shows us that you don't have to sit on a throne to have an effect on a king, that you don't have to be in the middle of the fight to decide how it goes. We show how great we really are when we choose justice, even when no one is looking. Hope was left behind by her steps. Her voice still sounds like a sound of caution. The Bible keeps her memory alive so that it can teach, inspire, and push people today. Without a doubt, Abigail was and always will be one of the best examples of how faith and knowledge can change not only stories, but also generations. Leave an amen in the comments if Abigail's story has moved you, and share this word with someone who needs peace during a hard time. Follow us in the next stories that build faith and show how God works through regular people. Like this movie and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for following us to the end of this incredible story. See you in the next video. May God be with you always. Amen.